Welcome to Supervision. My name is Robert Farrell. I am a doctor of education and counseling, specifically with a focus area of community counseling and care and trauma and recovery. So if you are watching this, then you are either one of my LPC-Associates that I'm helping to get your full licensure. If you are not one of mine, then hopefully you're just in the counseling industry and you find these videos to be helpful. It's been a little while since I posted a new video, and I've been doing some research on what areas I needed to go into, what topics we need to discuss, and I think we're now moving into a direction of really looking more at the theories. And so I will be putting together over the course of the next few months more videos specific to counseling and the theories of counseling. And I wanted to begin this one here with emotionally focused and do an introduction into the emotionally focused areas, specifically with today being Rogerian. The next video will focus more on the existential as well as the Gestalt approaches. So if you don't mind, let's sort of just dig in. So emotionally focused theories, the foundation of them have a very eclectic background. They don't just come from one area. These originated from the philosophies of humanism and existentialism. There's even some hint of feminism, as well as a few other different areas. The primaries, of course, are humanism and existentialism. But I think it's also important to recognize that because of this philosophical background, there is this quality of holistic involvement, looking at the full picture of the human being, more than the sum of the parts, as well as a phenomenological aspect that's involved. When we're talking about dealing with individuals, what we're really doing is we're looking into their lives and their emotions and helping them deal with them. In order to do that, we have to kind of walk that mile in their shoes and get to know their phenomenology, their experience, because a lot of this is very subjective. Humanism, of course, focusing on more of the emotion and not the background. Background-based therapy would be more in the category of psychodynamic, Freudian, Neo-Freudian, Jungian, those areas. We'll cover those in another video completely because they're very different than emotionally focused. Also, very different from the cognitive therapies. Cognitive itself, or the cognitive behavioral, those are unique to their own. Emotionally focused therapies, like I said, are eclectic, and they stem from three basic background specific individuals. We'll look at them next. So here are the three primary founders of emotionally focused therapies. We have Carl Rogers of Rogerian background that we're going to talk about in this session. And then there's the existential, Viktor Frankl, and his logotherapy. You can also add into that Rollo May, which I'll go into more detail when I cover existential approaches, and Gestalt, which the primary figure here will be Fritz Perls. We're going to go into details with these guys. Now, one of the things that's interesting about each of these is that Carl Rogers held that clients make progress only when they perceive the therapist as being empathic, caring, credible, and that they themselves feel understood. That's a key component to Rogerian approach. The existential therapy, logotherapy of Viktor Frankl, held that finding meaning in the face of challenges is how one fills the gap of the bookends of birth and death. 4 dimensions of life, spiritual, personal, social, and physiological, represent the ways a person experiences life with its purpose to gaining insight into the unavoidable paradoxes that life represents and to gain strength from that knowledge. And yes, I read that. It is a quote. Some of these areas sound best coming in quotations simply because they are not easy to just say off the top of your head. With Gestalt, it's a combination of Rogerian and existential humanistic. Gestalt holds to the importance of the therapeutic alliance, which most of you know I am a firm believer in, that without that, you're not going to get very far. Also, there's the phenomenological aspects, experiential and optimistic, as foundations to therapy. Gestalt promotes the here and now awareness as goals to recovery of health and well-being. So emotionally focused therapies have some assumptions that are built into them, and as a whole, that brings them together as EFT, these 4 assumptions include, as you can read for yourself, each person is viewed holistically. We look at them all at one time as a big picture. We can't break them into parts without negating something, because they are more than putting all of their pieces together. The second part is that each person has an innate ability to self-actualize. And yes, this does go right back to Maslow's hierarchy, and we're going to cover more of that as time goes by. The third assumption is that humans have free will and make choices. Now, the fourth assumption is based on the third. With free will, humans also have the responsibility of those choices. This is a difficult area. The thing that comes to my mind right now is the idea of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. That is very difficult for a lot of people, simply because what if I'm wrong? Oh dear God, how can I survive this problem if I make the wrong choice? Well, helping people to understand that a wrong choice can always be fixed is not always that easy. We'll get into more detail of that as time goes by. So emotionally focused therapy has some traits to it, and I'm trying to use some images here to help kind of guide this concept. Humanistic existential philosophies of therapy hold on to these specific traits that humans are fundamentally worthy of dignity and value of being a human being. There is a potential there that they can self-actualize their own dignity and value that will help them get to it. People are free to their own thoughts and beliefs and should not be placed into a mold by anyone. And that's really difficult for some therapists to do. I know I've struggled with it and still do on occasion. So we want to pigeonhole people into this mold of, I understand you now. This is one of the areas that we're very different from the emotionally focused than we would be from the psychodynamic and background approach. This is a key component of not forcing people into what we think is going on, but helping them understand themselves. There is no objective reality in experiencing the world, and the relationship is one of client-clinician, not as patient and professional. See, now this one here can be difficult for some folks. Objective reality does not exist because it's relationship based. It is subjective. Each person has their own relationship with themselves, with others, and with the world as a whole. In this trait of emotionally focused therapies, that leads to a teamwork concept, very essential to recovery. For your client to improve, you'll have to be working with them without putting them into a mold, helping them identify and create their own self-actualization of worth and esteem, honor, and dignity, where they have their own value within themselves. So emotionally focused therapy also works in dimensional concept. There's 8 dimensions here that we need to look at. They're kind of important for the whole process of therapy. These 8 dimensions of emotion and sensation is that one of them, it's not a luxury. Emotions are a necessity of life. We have to have them. Without them, we would run into a lot more difficulties. For example, emotions play a role in survival and maintaining homeostasis. I've used the example in group and in the individual counseling with regards to a mountain lion. And there you see the image of a silhouette of a mountain lion. Um, if you're out camping and you run into one, and let's say it has cubs with it, you should be worried. Anxiety and fear should permeate your being at that moment because life and survival are on the line. Okay? Now, let's take that same experience into your home, and the mountain lion's not there. You're in your home, you're in a very different survival situation. If you're feeling that level of anxiety and fear at home, that's an indication that you are no longer in homeostasis. Your balance is not accurate, okay? So emotions tell us that we are either in or out of balance. And that if we're out of balance, our homeostatic presence is out of whack, and we need to re-regulate those emotions to get them back into a regulated state. Balance is a key component of this dimension. Also, feelings can be overt and covert, as well as positive and negative, or neutral. And we can also be aware of them and unaware of them. So this is where it can get a little bit tricky. Your feelings can be seen by others, even if you're denying them yourself. They would become incongruent at that point. Okay, so your nonverbal communications, if they're not matching the words, then there's incongruency, and that is what we refer to as the rub. When we spot those incongruencies, we begin to see who the person really is and how they have developed their actual emotions. Also, emotions can be helpful or harmful, all right, depending on how they're used. Uh, in the proper setting, an emotion of fear, such as in the presence of a game wild animal, yeah, that can be very helpful. Now, at the same time, having that same sense of anxiety in a work environment where you have to give a talk to people, that may really become harmful for the person, leading to panic attacks, leading to agoraphobia, leading to other problems that they have to deal with. So these 8 dimensions are areas that we find emotions to be important in. They tell us information, telling us that we're either dysregulated, regulated, in balance, out of balance, in homeostasis, or out of homeostasis. So for this next area of emotionally focused therapy, there's 3 areas that I want to talk to you about. And because of the unique quality of these, I want to be very specific in how I say them. So I'm going to be reading what I wrote just to make it easier for me to make sure that I'm saying exactly what I need to say. Gender plays a role in emotions, as does age and culture. For each gender experience the same emotions. In other words, males and females, we share the same emotions, but they are not felt in the same way. Research has been conducted by Jacob, Keck, Salters, and Romer in 2003. If you have questions on them, feel free to contact me and we can look them up. In any case, their studies show that gender differences exist in the aspect of affect intensity and recognition in others. Women express emotions more freely and tend to express them stronger. Additionally, women are more attuned to emotions in the other person's facial expressions. Men, on the other hand, are more prone to expressing anger faster and tend to avoid emotions more frequently. age as an emotion is also been studied and tends to bring less anxiety and depression as a person gets older. A study by Charles Mather and Cartensen in 2003 also concluded that with age comes better emotional control, as older adults can remember more positive life events than younger adults do. Furthermore, they concluded that older adults place more value on their emotions by placing more meaning of value on those memories. Culture-wise, culture and emotions, a study done by Mesquita and Walder in 2002 found that the normal amount of emotion was required in understanding one's culture. Therefore, if one is to help a client of another culture, one must know and learn about that culture. I think a way I understood that one, the way they were describing it is, as an outsider of a culture, if I don't understand the culture enough, then understanding the normalization, the normalcy of a certain event combined with the emotions of that event may be difficult for me to connect with. And since EFT focuses on that emotional connectivity, the relationship between two individuals, it can be very difficult. So therefore, emotionally focused therapies really focus in gender, age, and culture, which is why I would encourage all of my associates, if you run into cultures that you don't know anything about, learn about them, ask questions, okay? If you're dealing with a client who is older than you, ask questions, get to understand their mindset. If you're dealing with a client of a different gender, or if your client is struggling with gender ambiguity or difficulty of understanding their gender and a gender role, get into their shoes to begin placing yourself in an understanding of their normal level of emotions. Remembering, going back to the idea of not putting them into a mold, we as the therapist, I as the therapist, am not the expert. I'm not the know-all, end-all. They are the expert of their lives, their culture, their age, their bracket, their socioeconomic status, not me. And so for me to help them means I have to understand the qualities of who it is to be them. Okay, so let's take a little bit and just talk about Carl Rogers himself. We're going to look now more at Rogerian therapy. He was born January 8th, 1902, and passed away February 4th, 1987, as an American psychologist. And for Rogerian therapy, mental illness it comes from conditions of worth. In other words, how a person values themselves. And what he would maintain is that from childhood, we're in a situation where personal worth can be increased or decreased. It can go up or it can go down. If raised in a negative environment, the person will perceive themselves as unworthy, devalue themselves, shut down and curtail tendencies towards growth and move more towards inner conflict. A lot of this does go back to childhood stuff, which makes it somewhat confusing because we're not looking at the background like psychodynamic, but we are looking at the childhood memories and how they valued themselves and what they learned. So that inner confusion that a person experiences that we would classify as mental illness comes from conflict on the inside in their inner as well as outer world experiences. It's conflict with one's acceptance by family and peers or friends. So we've looked at what Rogerian therapy would say causes mental illness. Let's now look at what fixes the mental illness. Okay, so for Rogerian therapy, a person gains wellness from opportunities that counter the negative effects of childhood experiences with positive, unconditional regard from the therapist. By gaining this, the person is able to self-actualize and grow. Hence, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The need for acceptance and love is lifelong. It's never ending. It continues as the person is alive. The ability to be accepted by someone leads them up that into self-actualization. This is what the person gains from the therapist. Congruent people, words and actions are equal, are demonstrating active mental health. So, I think the best way we can describe this is we as therapists have to be congruent to show them what congruency is, to help them see the congruence in us. We then in turn provide to them a place of safety and a place of belonging where we accept them unconditionally. We regard them and hold them to a level of esteem that is worthy of their human condition, giving them the chance to then self-actualize. So in many ways, you as the therapist are the tool through which they find the first three layers of safety, belonging, esteem, allowing them to reach that top of self-actualization, which would be the mental health. So what exactly is mental health in the first place? Well, there's several qualities to it that we can look to and see if they've got them. And when we see them, we can say, okay, we've achieved some level of improvement. They're getting healthy. One of them is being open to new experiences. Is your client open to a new way of thinking, a new way of expressing emotions, a new way of feeling? Are they trying something new? Are they living with a sense of purpose? Are they no longer stuck and they begin to find meaning and purpose in life? Trust, another big aspect. Is there congruence with themselves? Are they trusting themselves? Are they openly verbalizing and vocalizing what they think about themselves in a healthy way? Also, are they practicing unconditional positive self-regard as well as that for others? Okay, so in Rogerian approach, we would practice that unconditional positive regard, but are they beginning to do it as well? If they're beginning to do that, then they are moving into mental health. Another important one is internal locus of evaluation. So what that is basically saying, by what measure are they using to evaluate themselves? Are they making comparisons to other people? If they are, then that would not be an internal locus of evaluation. If they're using themselves as their own judge and saying, am I the person I need to be and want to be, then that's more health, more of a mental health condition. Are they fully aware of the moment? Now, this is where we're starting to lean into some of the Gestalt aspects of here and now. Are they present in the moment? Are they actively, creatively involved with a sense of purpose, as well as looking at themselves unconditionally and positively, and making choices in themselves for themselves, all at one time? If they're beginning to do these things, then they are in fact living healthy. So in the emotionally focused therapeutic approach that we would call Rogerian, there are 6 conditions for treatment in the therapeutic process. And I want to go through these not real fast, but fairly quickly, just so we can get through them. These conditions are requirements. The first one, a relationship exists. A psychological contact is taking place between you and the client. Okay? This is an important, a hugely important component. Without that condition, there's not going to be any quality therapeutic process taking place. The second is the client is in a state of incongruence, causing them to be vulnerable and anxious. Their own incongruence is what's thrown them into or out of the state of health and into a state of chaos or confusion, anxiety, or depression. The third is that you, as the therapist, the counselor, you are congruent, you are authentic in the relationship. You are not being fake, you are you and only you. The fourth quality is that the therapist experiences positive, unconditional regard for the client. Now, that can be difficult, especially when you have a very challenging client, but continuing to practice and experience their humanity and say, it's okay. I accept you as you are right here, right now. The fifth is that the therapist, you, experiences and attempt to experience the empathic understanding of the client's internal frame of reference. This is getting in their shoes and walking that mile, understanding them in a way that no one else does. Okay, and this can be dangerous, and we're going to talk about this one a little bit more in the next slide or two. The sixth one is that the therapist has unconditional positive regard, empathic understanding, and congruent authenticity is perceived by the client to some degree. This one I think is probably the most difficult one to maintain. If your client thinks you are blowing smoke and that you're not being authentic and that you're not congruent, then they're not going to listen. You've lost them. And that's a big problem, because if you cannot be congruent in your conduct with your client, how can we help them or help them or hope that they will find their own congruency in mental health? So it puts a lot of pressure on us as the therapist to know yourself, know what you're thinking, and make sure that you are congruent, that your expressions, your statements are truly yours and yours alone, that you are then sharing with them. These 6 conditions, it's going to take time to practice these and to really learn how to become the therapist. It's not just using the techniques and tools of counseling. In this situation, the therapy and the therapist is one and the same. You are the tool through which people see health, and we then work together to process that out. So some goals of therapy. There's 5 total goals of doing Rogerian style therapy. As any other situation, and most of you know, going into therapy, you're going to want to have goals. The hospitals require them. Private practice requires it. Your client should tell you what they want to accomplish. But there's also goals from our side, okay, as the therapist. So these 5 goals include promotion of self-awareness, helping them get to know who they are. Number 2, promotion of self-empowerment, helping them recognize that their choices in life are self-empowering. It is their choice. Even if they don't like the choice, it is still a choice. The third one is optimism. There's always hope. There's always a way to make things better as long as we don't give up. The fourth one, personal responsibility. This is a tough one. I'll have to admit, I don't like being responsible for myself all the time either. It's so much easier to point a finger and go, well, it wasn't my problem, it wasn't my fault. But personal responsibility. The fifth one is congruence and authenticity. These are all developed within the client as they build that internal locus of control. that ability that they say, this is my life. I'm going to live it. I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to empower myself. I'm going to be more self-aware, and I can see the responsibility of remaining optimal and positive by being congruent and authentic with everyone around me. It's a tough road, but it is very much doable. Now, I'm sure you may have heard in Rogerian therapy approach both of these qualities of being non-directive and therapeutic alliance. I put it as a non-directive alliance. A lot of people refer to it as a dance. That you're dancing with your partner, your client, to help them into a state of health and well-being. The therapeutic alliance is dedicated for all interventions that we do in therapy are intended to promote the therapeutic relationship, to promote that dance between me and the client, between yourself and your client. The non-directive quality is that the therapy does not present, or the therapist, I'm sorry, does not present themselves as the expert, but as a co-worker for mental health. The therapist is simply creating the moment where the client can grow and develop their own positive self-regard without internalized conditions of the self. That relationship dance is one that goes by for quite a while. Because of this, the therapy can take a while to complete. There is no time frame on it. So this is one of those areas that can be difficult if you're dealing with insurances because they want things done quickly. So as with all therapy approaches, we're going to have to look at limitations, strengths, and in this case, some dangers. The limitations, the therapist, we're open to exhaustion because we are required to maintain our own congruency, our own authentic self of being genuine, maintaining our own self-actualization, and our own empathic concern for the client. It can be emotionally exhausting, which is why if you're using this approach in the emotionally focused therapies, you need to set aside time between sessions to decompress, okay? It's really important that you know your own gas gauge, monitoring yourself. Where are you at? That's where I think that image of a monitor there is very helpful. The limitation is really one of the individual. This is kind of tricky in the sense that I cannot tell you as a therapist or as a therapy supervisor how many sessions a day you can do, okay? I've had some associates say 5 a day was fine, not a big deal. They could do a whole bunch. I've had others who are like, I can only handle 3 really heavy duty cases. I can speak from my own experience. The first client I ever had who had a extensive childhood abuse history, after an hour and a half of absorbing all of that emotional negative energy, I had to really decompress. It takes time to practice this approach because of this limitation. Now, let's look at the strengths for a moment. One of the major strengths is that empathic responding is about normalizing their feelings and removing their isolation, promoting self-exploration and the creation of new meaning for the client. This approach is so unique and so strong in that category that once alliance has been established, their growth happens very, very quickly. So it has a positively strong strength to it. Now, let's go to the dangers. Because of the intimacy and the level of getting to know the person, the therapeutic alliance, being like the dance, it is very intimate. We get to know deep details of the individual. The hierarchical needs of belonging and love and empathy and getting that connection with a person can lead a client and a therapist into areas of a dual relationship. So you have got to be very, very firm in your boundary setting. That is the number one danger that I see in this EFT approach of Rogerian therapy, because you're opening yourself up to a relationship where you're being congruent. You may, as a part of that relationship, that therapeutic alliance, you may share some of your own information and reveal to your client something of yourself. That's a normal part of the process. However, that does not mean we're in a relationship with them other than therapeutic only. And so they can, as a client, they can misinterpret our intentions. And so we have to be very astute and recognizing if something's happening, we have to see it and be aware of it. My own experience with this is that years ago I had a young man who interpreted the therapeutic alliance as one of friendship and then love. His culture was, and gender orientation, sexual orientation, was not the same as mine, but he was interpreting what we were doing as dating. And so when you become aware of this, you have to really say, wait a second, we're going into a dangerous area of therapy, and it's very important that you are firm in your boundaries and your ethics on where the lines are drawn. That is the biggest dilemma of this approach. Well, we have just completed our first emotionally focused therapeutic introduction with a key element of Rogerian. Rogerian is not only just for EFT. Pretty much all approaches to therapy and counseling require a level of Rogerian involvement. Most best practices approaches in the industry would say that if you're not experiencing a level of Rogerian therapy, then you're not really doing good therapy and counseling. But as we've talked, this is just the beginning of the therapeutic and theoretical positions. So one of the things that I tell all of my associates is that they're beginning to develop in the beginning stage, the first few months, that I want them to begin developing their personal aspect of therapy. Who are they as a therapist? What's their identity as a therapist? How they're going to do therapy? And that is because I come from an emotionally focused approach. Having said that, my therapeutic technique is going to be a mixture. It is eclectic. And so I think most of us now are. In any case, I want to say thank you for watching this session of supervision. And if you want to add a comment, please do so. And again, if you're one of my associates, I have probably emailed you the link to watch this. And if I haven't, if you're a future, then I'll probably instruct you to go find it and watch it. In any case, thank you for watching, and as always, you're welcome to supervision. I would look forward to talking to any of my associates. If you have a question, give me a call. You already have my number, and I'll see you on the next session.